What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my updated Week 14 running back rankings. Already put out the wide receivers earlier today. Check those out if you haven't seen them after this one. But let's just dive right into it. We're going to start off in Tier 1, and just like my video earlier in the week, it is a Saquon Barkley tier. He's the running back 1 in points per game. He's going up against the Panthers, who are allowing the most fantasy points per game to the running back position. If the RB1 has the best matchup, he's got to be in a tier by himself. That is Saquon Barkley. Now moving into tier 2, still a ton of really strong plays. Going to start off this tier with Chase Brown going up against the Cowboys. Ever since Zach Moss has gone down, the Bengals have force-fed Chase Brown, and he has produced. He has put up 19 or more PPR points in his last 4 games. Also a favorable matchup here. The Cowboys are allowing the 4th most points per game to the running back position. Then after Chase Brown, going to go with Devon Achane going up against the Jets. He just continues to produce with Tua at quarterback, 23 points per game in games where Tua is starting. And, he's getting it done sometimes on the ground, but the majority of his production is coming from his receiving usage. So he can have a rough day on the ground, be super inefficient, and that receiving workload is still going to carry him. My RB4 this week is going to be Alvin Kamara going up against the Giants. He's been fairly consistent as of late, 15 plus points in 4 of his last 5. The problem is just that he has not been getting into the end zone. His last touchdown was in week 6. It's a nice matchup against the Giants. They've allowed the 8th most points per game to the running back position, and this team is just so beat up in terms of their weapons. I think the touchdowns are going to come, especially Taysom Hill going down. He's someone who kind of vultured some of the rushing opportunities, some of the goal line work. I think that's definitely a plus, Taysom Hill's injury for Kamara's season-long touchdown upside. Few more guys in this tier. We have Bijan Robinson going up against the Vikings. He's been balling out, 20 plus points in 6 of his last 7. It's not a good matchup here against the Vikings. They are bottom 3 in points per game allowed, but he's been producing at such a high level. I still feel comfortable playing him. Someone who has a really strong matchup is Kyren Williams going up against the Bills. They are allowing the 3rd most points per game to the position. Kyren Williams hasn't been great as of late, but is coming off his best game since week 8. Then I have James Cook going up against the Rams. It's a solid matchup here, 9th in points per game allowed to the running back position. He's had, some solid games as of late. And then my last guy in this tier, it's Bucky Irving going up against the Raiders, but I will say dealing with some injuries right now. He has not practiced this week, dealing with both hip and back injuries. He's put up 27 points in back-to-back games, but at this point, it seems like he might be in jeopardy of actually, just missing week 14 altogether. If that is the case, obviously Rachaad White gets a massive boost. He's someone I'll talk about later on. And if you're desperate, Sean Tucker would not be the craziest play. I imagine they're going to want to keep this committee going, so I would not be shocked if we were looking at like a Rachaad White, Sean Tucker split if Bucky Irving did miss time. But if Bucky Irving's playing the way he's balled out over the last couple of weeks, he's got to be in your lineup. Now, looking at tier 3, going to start off this tier with Tony Pollard going up against the Jaguars. The Jaguars are allowing the 2nd most points per game to the running back position. The Titans are favored in this matchup. This has Tony Pollard workhorse game just written all over it. Then after Pollard, you're going to go with James Conner going up against the Seahawks. Actually, back-to-back running backs in the same matchup. James Conner, RB10. Kenneth Walker, RB11. James Conner on the season is the running back 17 in points per game. I think RB10 is fair this week, given the guys who have already played, and then also the running backs that are on bye. Kenneth Walker definitely struggled as of late, also banged up, did not practice Thursday, dealing with ankle and calf injuries. If he's playing, this is where I'd have him. If he's not playing, Zach Charbonnet gets a massive boost. I think if Walker misses, Charbonnet would be a tier 2 guy for me just because he's going to come in and be the workhorse like we saw early on in the season. And then another running back who's banged up is Breece Hall going up against the Dolphins. He did not practice Thursday with his knee injury. If Breece Hall ends up missing time, Braylon Allen would be my top choice, but Isaiah Davis also might get involved in somewhat of a committee there. Now, moving into tier 4, definitely a very large tier. We're going to start off with Isaac Guerendo going up against the Bears. He's obviously interesting now with CMC and Jordan Mason out for the foreseeable future. I did talk about Deebo Samuel in my wide receiver video. I could see him starting to work in at the running back position, given the fact that the Niners are pretty much down their top 3 running backs heading into the season. But Guerendo definitely should be the clear-cut running back 1. And I think he could definitely be ranked higher moving forward. It'll just be interesting to see if they're just going to unload that full workload on him. If they are and they're giving him the Jordan Mason treatment early on in the season, he should definitely be ranked higher than this moving forward. Then I have Tyrone Tracy going up against the Saints. He's been solid, ever since he's taken over as the starter. It's a nice matchup here. The Saints are allowing the 5th most points per game to the position. Then we have Rico Dowdle going up against the Bengals, coming off a workhorse game on Thanksgiving, 22 carries for 112 yards and a touchdown, 3 receptions for 11 yards. Fine matchup here against the Bengals. Not great for opposing running backs, but I do think it's a softer matchup, so just more touchdown upside here for Rico. I have Swift as my RB16 going up against the 49ers. Another one of these running backs who's banged up. Did not practice on Thursday with a quad injury. You also have Roschon Johnson, who's trying to work back from a concussion. So not great for the health of these Bears backs. If Swift can play, it's a nice matchup against the 49ers. They are top 7 in points per game allowed to running backs. I have Najee as my RB17 going up against the Browns, coming off a huge week 13, 24.9 PPR points. He's just had a very consistent workload, super involved on the ground, 16 or more carries in each of his last 6 games. After Najee, going to go with Aaron Jones going up against the Falcons. He's been struggling as of late, under 13 PPR points in 5 out of his last 6 games. Also draws a tough matchup here against the Falcons. They were allowing the 7th fewest points per game. Kind of a rough, season arc here for Aaron Jones, because early on, the dude was producing. He was balling out. It looked like he was just going to be like this smash pick. He's cooled off as of late. I still think he's like a solid mid-tier RB2 this week, but, probably disappointing given what we saw early on in the season. 3 more guys in this tier. My RB19 is Rachaad White. Like I talked about with Bucky, if Bucky misses time this week, I think Rachaad White is going to skyrocket up these rankings, but I also think he's going to be in somewhat of a split with Sean Tucker. I have Chuba going up against the Eagles here. It's a bad matchup. The Eagles are bottom 4 in points per game allowed. Also saw somewhat of a close split between him and Jonathan Brooks. 12 carries for Chuba Hubbard, 6 for Jonathan Brooks, but Brooks was also involved as a pass catcher. They're pretty big underdogs in this game. Maybe this is like a favorable game script for Jonathan Brooks, but Chuba's been impressive. I think they're still going to be committed to him. And, this Panthers offense has looked better than expected over the past couple of weeks. And then we're going to close out this tier with Isaiah Pacheco going up against the Chargers. Now, on paper, it's not a great matchup. The Chargers are allowing the 6th fewest points per game to the running back position. But I do think Pacheco is going to start to kind of pull away here in this backfield. His first game back, it was close to a 50-50 split. He definitely looked like the better option. I think he's kind of going to step into that RB1 role. Not that Kareem Hunt's going to be completely phased out, but I would expect him to lead the backfield this week. And then my tier 5, only 3 guys here. We're going to go Jaylen Warren going up against the Browns. He has put up double-digit points in 3 straight weeks. Obviously, the clear running back 2 behind Najee Harris. Also have Cordell Patterson working in, which is kind of frustrating, but he's still finding a way to produce. Going to get involved as a pass catcher. My RB23 is going to be Travis Etienne going up against the Titans. He looks to be the running back 1 here. It's not a pretty offense, but week 13, 16 opportunities. Plus, just game script wise, they're going to be trailing, most likely against the Titans. They're going to be trailing a lot of these matchups, and he's the guy they go to in that spot. Tank Bigsby's more of like the, grind it out, you have a lead. Etienne's the guy that they're going to go to in trailing spots. And then the last guy in this tier is Nick Chubb going up against the Steelers. Saw more of a split in the week 13 game than we'd like to see. Pretty much, 50-50 opportunities with Jerome Ford. I do think some of that was game script dependent, but they're also going to be dogs here against the Steelers. So not ideal, but he was the guy who got into the end zone. At this point, you're just kind of hoping he can build some momentum towards the end of the season. Tier 6, also just going to have 3 players. We're going to start it off with Gus Edwards going up against the Chiefs. Looks to be the Chargers lead back with no J.K. Dobbins, but it's just a very, very gross backfield, plus just a really, really rough matchup here against the Chiefs, who are allowing the fewest points per game to running backs. After Edwards, I have Kareem Hunt going up against the Chargers. Talked about him with Pacheco. I do expect him to be the number 2, but he's still going to be involved. So find like high-end RB3 this week. And then my RB27 is going to be Sincere McCormick from the Raiders going up against the Buccaneers. And I'm just going to be honest here. I don't have a strong read on what is going on in this Raiders backfield. So he's the only Raider that I'm ranking right now because we just don't know the health and status of these guys. So in week 13, you had McCormick and you had Amir Abdullah. I think most people, including myself, thought that, Abdullah would be the play. He would be the lead back, look decent in week 12. We end up seeing McCormick lead this backfield in carries and was also very efficient with his opportunities. 12 carries for 64 yards in a tough matchup against the Chiefs. I think both guys were targeted 2 times. So if Madison and Zamir White miss again, I think you have to favor McCormick, but it's probably pretty close between him and Abdullah. The problem here is that Alexander Madison was a limited participant on Thursday. So it's possible that he returns, and then it's like, is it Madison taking over? Is it McCormick who, is somehow retaining this job? We just do not know. So at this point, I'm ranking McCormick. I'm not ranking anyone else. If Madison is going to play, Zamir White seems like a long shot to play. If Madison is going to play this week, I would prefer to just fade this entire backfield. I get it if you have to play one of them with 6 teams on bye. Like my tier 7 is going to be pretty gross, pretty much like all handcuffs. But if you could avoid, messing with this Raiders backfield, that's the path that I would look to take. And then the final tier here, tier 7, like I said, it's not pretty. A lot of handcuff options, but if you're desperate, you got to do what you got to do. We're going to go Zach Charbonnet here against the Cardinals, the Kenneth Walker handcuff. He might be someone who just steps into a workhorse role if Walker can't play. Even if Walker does play, though, if I'm going to pick a handcuff, might as well have someone who's somewhat involved week to week, plus could see an expanded role due to a banged-up RB1. Jonathan Brooks is my RB29. Like I talked about with Chuba Hubbard, 9 opportunities last week. Looked good as a pass catcher. They're 12.5-point underdogs. Could he be the guy that benefits from this, potential game script? Braylon Allen going up against the Dolphins. Like I talked about with Brees. Brees is banged up. Could potentially have a larger role just with an injury, but like we saw last week, him and Isaiah Davis were both involved as Brees was kind of limited. Then I have Jerome Ford, splitting opportunities 50-50 with Nick Chubb last week. Could be a trailing game script, which would benefit Jerome Ford. Ray Davis is just going to have these decent games out of nowhere where he gets into the end zone. Just a good, backup running back who's, behind someone who's not necessarily a full-blown workhorse in James Cook. So if you're hoping for him to get into the end zone, it's not the worst bet in the world. Tank Bigsby is my RB33 going up against the Titans. 8 opportunities last week. Kind of surprisingly led in routes run. Not someone who I'm super excited about, but, showed some flashes early on in the season. We're getting desperate at this point. And then a couple more handcuffs, Tajay Spears going up against the Jags, and then Cam Akers going up against the Falcons. That is going to wrap it up for my top 35 running backs. If you guys enjoyed, smash that like button, subscribe. Any questions, feel free to drop them down below. But thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.